laugh like hell. Let's have some fun doing it. That's a big part of it. But let's just don't waste any time or energy. It's all about winning. Please reflect that each and every day.
It's time for another edition of the Mike McCarthy Show, powered by Reliant Energy. I'm Bill Jones, inside the Academy Sports and Outdoors studios here at the Star in Frisco. It's divisional playoff weekend in the National Football League. The Cowboys now a couple of weeks into the 2021 offseason. And we kick off this week's show taking a look at the defensive side of the football with the head coach. Of course, it was a struggle defensively for the first 3/4 of this season. Great improvement in the month of December. A change made at defensive coordinator as Mike Nolan is out. Dan Quinn is in as the Cowboys' new DC. And we start our conversation with Mike McCarthy talking about defense.
The edge, Nolan got the ball. Ball is loose, down it goes. The Cowboys have gotten it again.
Pressure, throws it over the middle, tipped and intercepted at the 40-yard line. It is Donovan Wilson coming left to the 45, taken off his feet at the Giants' 42.
Well, I mean, the takeaways, especially the last 4 weeks, I mean, that's as good as there was in the league this year. So, I mean, that's what you're looking for. I mean, you like to obviously, play at that level and that level of production throughout a 16-game season. Frankly, that's something you can see right away. There wasn't a lot of, I don't say experience. I mean, the fine motor skill was probably not where it needed to be. But I just, I give our players a tremendous amount of credit at staying after it with the drills, the daily drills, and it's just like anything in this game, particularly with the fundamentals that you're stressing. Is you got to have the confidence to apply it on Sundays, and I think you see the result of that. Just look at the course of how our defense finished. Taking the ball away, but definitely struggled there. The first seven or so games, particularly with the run defense and the points. But I would say the last 7-8 weeks, we definitely are on the upswing, and the takeaways is a huge part of that.
When you look back now and changing defenses and in the environment with the virtual offseason and no preseason games, how much did that sort of put the defense behind the 8 ball a little bit as far as making that adjustment to a new defense?
It definitely. I think it's it's a very fair question and outlook on if you had to do it all over again. We had a lot of change on offense, more than I think people realized, but there definitely was a change in language on the defense. We were going to go with more volume. It was something that was part of the outlook and the vision that I had coming in here, and based off of the initial roster and things like that. So, but I'm going to say about week 3 or 4, we felt like we had to change the direction, and our players responded very well. So, if we had it all over again, the volume wouldn't have been where it was. Particularly in training camp.
One of the mainstays of that defense and one of the leaders of that defense is DeMarcus Lawrence at defensive end. What impressed you the most about Tank throughout this season?
Well, Tank's an impact player. He plays the game the same way every snap. He's got a tremendous motor, but he has the length and the twitch to make big plays. So he's obviously a force for us, and and I thought he did a lot of nice things this year.
When you look at your linebacking core, of course, Leighton Vander Esch moved to middle linebacker, Jalen Smith at the wheel. What do you see out of your linebackers as the season progressed?
I really liked Leighton in the middle and Jalen at the wheel. Jalen's obviously, his production speaks for itself. He plays so hard. And particularly, the production he has, particularly, with the tackles. Leighton fought through two different injuries, but I think he looks very natural in there. But I thought the other guys that stepped up, for Leighton when he was injured, gave us some solid football. Sean Lee was productive in there. Joe Thomas, Luke Gifford there, played a little bit. So it's a very good group with good depth.
We'll have more with Coach McCarthy coming up later on the Mike McCarthy Show as we turn our attention to special teams. But up next, it's David Moore, the Dallas Morning News. Let's take a look at Dan Quinn.
The Mike McCarthy Show. presented by Reliant, is brought to you by AT&T. Ford. Visit your local Ford dealer. Built for Texas, built for you. The University of North Texas, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys. Miller Lite, the only beer of the Cowboys. And by Reliant, an NRG company. This segment is brought to you by the Dallas Morning News. Nobody does sports like Sports Day. Your home for complete Dallas Cowboys coverage.
The Mike McCarthy Show, powered by Reliant Energy, continues now. Bill Jones joined by David Moore of the Dallas Morning News, SportsDayDFW.com, inside the Academy Sports and Outdoor Studios for the first time this season. Finally, we got you here.
It's nice to get outside the house. Yes, it's wonderful.
All right, let's talk about what's
We have our petition here, so
yeah,
that's
we do.
good, because otherwise I didn't want to.
Safe
this
distancing.
Is more than close enough to you.
That's why David hasn't been here all season, because we can't let a ink-stained scribe come into the facility, right?
Many people take that stance.
All right, let's talk what the Cowboys have done on the defensive side of the ball, coaching staff-wise since we last talked. Mike Nolan out, Jim Tomsula out, and you got Dan Quinn as the new defensive coordinator. Let's start there.
Dan Quinn, certainly well respected around the league, was the defensive coordinator of the Seattle teams that went to Super Bowl back-to-back. Took over head coach as the Atlanta Falcons. That team went to the Super Bowl a couple years later, so was actually coaching in the Super Bowl 3 out of 4 years, I believe, and there aren't a lot of coaches that can say that. When you look at the resume, when you look at the respect around the league, I think this is as strong of a hire as you can have at defensive coordinator. They did not have the success defensively in Atlanta that you would expect. A lot of that is how their resources were allocated. It was very heavy on the offensive side of the ball. So I think this is a good opportunity for Dan Quinn to remind everyone why he is so highly valued around the league as a defensive mind. And it's a good opportunity for the Cowboys. And I don't think this is just about going back to a scheme that was successful for the Cowboys a couple of years ago. I really think a lot of this is about an attitude and the way you approach the game. I think in that respect, I think there are a lot of similarities between Dan Quinn and Rod Marinelli, just in the relationships they form with their players. If Rod Marinelli was the crazy, funny granddad that all the players loved, I think Dan Quinn is going to be the cool dad that everyone loves playing for, from what I've heard from other people around the league.
Yeah, and building that brotherhood on defense, which is what they had in Seattle and when they made their Super Bowl run with Atlanta. He's a defensive line coach in his background. Was that with the Seahawks before he left and went to Florida as the DC and then came back to the Seahawks as a DC. One of the great picks they made in Atlanta was Grady Jarrett in the 5th round, a defensive tackle. If they can make picks like that, that defensive line is going to improve.
Yeah, and you have some players here. I mean, with DeMarcus Lawrence, with Randy Gregory, with Aldon Smith, where does he fit at this stage in his comeback? Is he really more suited to that outside end in a 4-3? And even an intriguing pick from last year, Bradley and who didn't play a lot as the season went along. You can see him maybe finding roles for these guys. Another thing I would put out there is, I would say, I know a lot of Cowboys fans have been frustrated or puzzled by not spending more draft capital or free agent capital on safeties. I think Dan Quinn puts a very high priority on safety play and what it means to a defense. And I think he is going to look at that position and lobby for that position very strongly.
Especially when you look at Seattle, of course, with Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor, and then Keanu Neal in Atlanta as well. Okay, we're going to have more with David Moore coming up a little bit later here on the Mike McCarthy Show. But up next, let's turn our attention to that Cowboys secondary with Rob Phillips.
This segment was brought to you by the Dallas Morning News. Nobody does sports like Sports Day. Your home for complete Dallas Cowboys coverage.
Welcome back to the Mike McCarthy Show, powered by Reliant Energy. Bill Jones inside the Academy Sports and Outdoors Studios, now joined by Rob Phillips of DallasCowboys.com, as we are focusing on this Dallas defense because, after all, that's what the Cowboys are doing. They're focusing on shoring up this defense. And first off the bat, Rob, what's your take on the hiring of Dan Quinn as the defensive coordinator?
I think it makes a lot of sense for the Cowboys, Bill. When you just think about what they went through this year with so many changes on the defense staff, no offseason really to get the program going, and that's one big reason why Mike Nolan was not retained. So you're going into another uncertain offseason. You don't know if it's going to be a virtual program, potentially at least partly, and Dan Quinn's got a great track record. He's won where he's been. Seattle was arguably in 2013 the greatest, or one of the greatest defenses of all time, and he's bringing a scheme with him that pretty much is similar to what the Cowboys ran in past years with Rod Marinelli, with Chris Richard, who's another former Seattle assistant. So a lot of continuity, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So bring in a veteran coach who can kind of tie it all together, and is known for developing players. Okay, and so how important do you think the scheme is? How important is it to have a scheme that fits the players that you have on the team right now, considering the salary cap ramifications of adding players? Extremely, extremely important. I think it might be the most important thing, just in terms of they don't know what the salary cap level is at this point in the offseason. It could be flat, it could be reduced. Either way, it's going to be difficult for them to sign a bunch of free agents and upgrade the personnel, which they need to do. The draft's going to be critical, but I think having some familiarity with the veterans who are currently on the team, they've been in the scheme, that was one of the biggest issues. We didn't see until December Mike Nolan's defense sort of take off. And you factor in what Dan Quinn is known for. He's a great communicator. And I mentioned the virtual program potentially. Again, if there are elements of that, you've got to have a great teacher, a guy that can get his message across well in the offseason if it's not totally back to normal. That's a big point right there. You look at Dan Quinn and his history as a defensive line coach. Of course, Jim Tomsula was let go as well. And then Joe Witt Jr. comes in as well as the pass game coordinator on defense and the secondary coach. He has a past history with Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn, and so that was important probably. Yeah, absolutely. I think having a little bit of that, Mike was able to put his staff together early last year, but I think not having coaches that had worked together really as much might have been a factor in tying everything together last offseason, because it was all virtual. So you've kind of got that conduit with Joe Witt Jr., who has a great reputation across the league for working in the secondary. He was with McCarthy in Green Bay for several years, and there are a lot of question marks about this secondary in terms of who's going to be back. A lot of free agents coming up. So someone that is familiar with Mike, I think, get that scheme across is really important. All right, we got much more still to come here on the Mike McCarthy Show, powered by Reliant Energy. When we come back, we turn our attention to Cowboys special teams. How many changes need to be made on special teams? Well, we got some rankings that say maybe not that many changes. Welcome back to the Mike McCarthy Show, powered by Reliant Energy. Bill Jones inside the Academy Sports and Outdoors Studios here at the Star in Frisco. Let's talk Cowboys special teams. Goose Goslin's annual special team rankings came out this past week. The Cowboys number 11 in the league. And Mike McCarthy has a lot of respect for those rankings.
Well, first and foremost, no one does it better than Goose, as we know. So, but yeah, I'm curious to see where we come out. I thought our special teams was our most consistent unit, all season. Our grades reflect that. I think the job that John Fossil does, and particularly with Matt, the way they utilize the players. I think we had 5 rookies start on our punt team the last couple of weeks. At one time, we had 6 rookies enter on the punt team, and as we all know, the punt team is the team that has the biggest challenge. So I thought those guys did a heck of a job. We were aggressive early with some deceptives. Didn't hit on all of them, but it's a group that plays the right way. And John has done a great job creating an atmosphere there. And as we like to say, it's not a special teams unit; it's a special teams fellowship.
Let's talk some special teams as Rob Phillips rejoins us now. Cowboys 11th in special teams according to Goose's rankings. What do you think about Coach Fossil and the special teams this year?
Well, there were some mixed results. You know, there were some situational things they tried. I mean, he's a gambler. John Fossil is a gambler. He's known for that. And they tried some fake punts. They tried some things to jumpstart their offense, jumpstart their defense at times because they struggle with consistency with both. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But you look overall at what they did, and I think it was a pretty good year. You know, Mike McCarthy said right after the season, probably his best unit in terms of what they were doing production-wise. And you can see that from the kicking game and as well as the coverage game.
You know, I think it's interesting when you look at the dynamics of a coaching staff and coaches learning other coaches. And obviously, Coach Fossil is one of the most respected special teams coaches in the league. He's also a guy that really believes, he's got such a positivity about him. He believes a play is going to work. And so I think there's a feeling out process in the first year that McCarthy's working with Fossil that, okay, how much freedom do I give Fossil to call that fake punt or to do certain things on special teams? And I think they'll be better going forward along those lines.
Yeah, and I think if you're more of a consistent offense and defense, you may have to do less of that going forward. But I also think there's a strategy to that. I think sometimes that threat of those fakes can allow you to be a little bit better on your punt team or your kickoff team. So that's part of it. But Greg Zuerlein almost broke the record for most field goals made in a season coming aboard, worked with Fossil in the past. And on their punt team, I think they had 4 or 5 rookies. So working with a lot of young players, you would imagine, because he is a teacher and he is known for that they're going to be better in that regard next year too.
All right, Rob Phillips, we appreciate it. And up next here on the Mike McCarthy Show, David Moore rejoins us, and let's look ahead to Sunday in the National Football League playoffs. Final segment here of the Mike McCarthy Show, powered by Reliant Energy, as David Moore rejoins us now. Let's look ahead to Sunday, the divisional playoff round of the NFC playoffs. And I think they're intriguing matchups myself, starting with the 2 o'clock game on CBS. The battle of the quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield for Cleveland, Patrick Mahomes for Kansas City. You recall back in college, it was a 66-59 game when these two quarterbacks matched up.
When it's something like 1,700 yards in total offense or some outrageous number.
It was.
If they can duplicate that or replicate that in any way, that's going to be a fascinating matchup. Cleveland getting to this point, what Cleveland did in the first round, going into Pittsburgh, I think where they were something like, 6-44 or something like that in Pittsburgh. Go there without their head coach, without their best corner because of COVID, several other, and just dominated that game from the start. I know it wound up a little closer with the final score, but Pittsburgh really didn't have a shot in that game. I mean, Cleveland took it from the start and just dominated. And that's really a great story as long as they have been out. And a lot of people expected them to break through last year, and that doesn't happen a lot of times. But they came back this year, and this was their breakthrough year. Great story. It ends against Kansas City. It's difficult to envision that they'll be able to hang with Kansas City in this one.
The other thing on Mayfield and Mahomes, of course, they were teammates at Texas Tech
exactly.
as well. And here, so it takes us to the second game. It's Drew Brees versus Tom Brady, the Saints hosting Tampa Bay. And on this state championship weekend, Drew Brees won a state championship for Austin Westlake 24 years ago in 1996. And what an intriguing matchup, the Sunday night game.
Oh, and what you would say the two best quarterbacks of this generation going against each other for the third time this year. And that's the thing. I mean, New Orleans handled them pretty easily, really, the first 2 times they played. Now, you can say that's going to happen again. I would refer you back to the Cowboys when they handled the Giants and then faced the New York Giants in the second round, the divisional round, back after that 13-3 year, and it didn't turn out that way. I would anticipate this game would be closer and more competitive than the first 2 that these teams played that the Saints really controlled. But New Orleans is really tough. I got to think they're going to take this for a third time and advance to the NFC Championship.
All right, so you got New Orleans and you got Kansas City on Sunday.
Yes. I don't think I'm going out too far on a limb on those 2 picks.
Very good. I think I probably agree with you there. Going to be very interesting on Sunday. David Moore, we appreciate it. And we appreciate you joining us here on the Mike McCarthy Show, powered by Reliant Energy. We will see you again next week.
The Mike McCarthy Show, presented by Reliant, was brought to you by Ford. Visit your local Ford dealer. Built for Texas, built for you. Bank of America, the official bank of the Dallas Cowboys. Miller Lite, the only beer of the Cowboys. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. And by NFL Game Pass. You'll never miss a game again. Enjoy full access to coaches' film and game replays from Week 1 to the Super Bowl. Subscribe at DallasCowboys.com/Game Pass.